everyone, welcome to Wandering DMs. I'm Paul.
And I'm Dan, and on this episode of Wandering DMs, we're going to be talking about character expenses. What are the things that your player characters are spending money on? And that's something that's changed between different editions of D&D. Maybe in your game you have different emphasis or different menu of options for characters. All that and more today on Wandering DMs. Oh, I should do like a what things do they spend money on, and how much do they cost, and when should they get rid of them? Like that. So, Paul, I think last season we had an episode talking about economy, and we were, and to our mutual surprise, that actually got more hits than a lot of our other episodes, strangely. But we were talking about things like trade and baronies and kind of like high-level economic stuff. And I think some viewer asked, why don't you do more about like the player expenses? So maybe the prior thing was ways that money come in, and this episode's more about ways that money go out.
Yeah. It's a real problem, honestly, and it's something I've seen come up in both my BX campaign and my 5th edition campaign. Eventually, the players are sitting on mountains of gold, and how do you give them a reason to drain it? Right?
There you go. And certainly, of course, this is super familiar to us and a lot of our viewers. The early version of the game, the primary way that you leveled up and got experience was by getting treasure. Right. Every gold piece you get out of the dungeon, that's an experience point. That's actually the primary way that you level up, as a matter of fact.
Right.
So as a result, you'd wind up having these enormous mounds of, dragon hordes that the player characters actually have. Seems a little silly, so sometimes we're looking for opportunities to drain that, as a matter of fact. So that's why it's on a lot of our minds.
And in older editions, too, I think that combines with the geometric XP production. Can't talk
Progression.
Today. Progression. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. Thank you very much. Right. To really make it a horrible problem, right? Come level 4 or 5, suddenly the party who was interested in a 100 gold piece reward to go save the missing child is now like, we'll just buy the whole town, like whatever. We have millions.
Just a little side tangent here. Last night on the channel, Isabel and I ran a Book of War stream, and I tangled up words and spoonerisms so many times. I needed the viewers to correct me about 3 times on crap that I misspoke.
That's funny.
It's going around these days. So thank you, viewers, for the help.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of stuff. I have a ton of notes. You have a ton of notes. This is possibly, I have the most visual aids of any show we've done. So we should jump right into this, Dan.
Tell me, Paul. You're the more of the 5th edition expert than I am. Tell me, what are the primary things in 5th edition that player characters are spending their money on these days?
Okay, great. So let's start with just simple upkeep, right? So lifestyle expenses, day to day. How much does it cost to live? So 5th edition in the player's handbook gives us this nice little chart of different lifestyle levels you can live at, and a gold piece cost per day. It gives us then descriptions of those different levels, right? Anything from wretched and squalid up to wealthy, aristocratic. You can see that the bottom of the chart's uncapped. It's 10 gold piece minimum, but we can spend as much. You let them spend as much as they want. And that's nice. A trick certainly I've done in the past is anytime players want to buy something, like I want to buy like a really nice blah. And I say, well, at minimum, it's going to cost you 100 gold, but you can sink as much into it as you want, and I will regulate how fancy it is based on how much you spend. And a lot of times players will just dump money into that.
Yep. Yeah. I have the same thing, actually. So in my OD&D game, I have players that have quite a bit of money, and so they wind up bejeweling things they carry around. Like they don't trust leaving it in some safe space, so they actually have like a golden scepter with a whole bunch of gems on it. They actually just cart around on a daily basis. And I'm kind of in the same boat on that, actually.
Yeah. The interesting thing here, I think, is like this chart, even at wealthy, is only going up to 4 gold pieces a day, which I think is not very much. So like your basic, how much does it cost to live is pretty freaking low, and it's not really going to be a major drain.
Right. They're more or less doubling it each step, but it's still not very much. Now, I will point out this is very, very similar to a chart that was back in 3rd edition. So it might be the exact same tier. So as usual, a lot of stuff that I see in 5th edition looks very, very similar to 3rd edition to me, and I think that this chart comes almost entirely right out of 3rd edition, actually, as a variant, if I recall.
So, so what else can we do to drain money in 5th edition out of our characters? There are some options in the Dungeon Master's Guide under downtime activities. So we get stuff like carousing. Hey, look, it's carousing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's not the carousing you think it is, Dan, but it is carousing.
All right.
I said we were eventually going to talk about carousing on here, and for sure we'll talk about the form of carousing I love to use, which is Jeff Riant's carousing. This carousing table basically just lets you sink some money in and roll on a chart, and it's basically gambling. So the chart will either give you some money back or drain more money from you, but that's about it. And it has some little like, role play stuff that you can bring in, but it's not quite Jeff Riant's carousing rules. Before we dig into that, I'll just quickly cover the DMG also gives us some stuff like building a stronghold.
Just tell me what's the reward? I'm sorry, Paul. What's the reward for that carousing there? Do you get experience? Is there risk involved? Or
more money, honestly. It's more money. It doesn't quite drain. It can drain because you got to put money in. It's basically gambling, right? You put money in, and either you're going to lose yet more money or get some money back.
Okay.
Yeah. So it really is
D&D slot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
I like it.
You can see here on the same page we have building a stronghold, so we have our costs for constructing pieces of a stronghold. That's classic. I think we talked a lot about that in the past, so I'm not gonna harp on that one. And on our next page we have stuff like crafting magic items or running a business. There's some other stuff in here, but those are the two major ones where I see like money values attached. Crafting a magic item is interesting, and in general, I'd say a lot of 5th edition players, I think, see that as the major money sink is magic items. Do you allow trade of magic items, buying and selling of magic items? You'll see this on Critical Role. Like, the big thing that they're always saving up their money for is to buy a magic item.
Great.
So that's...
most, 80% of these themes have been there since the inception. So these are... It's good to know that this is a place where we can hold hands with current players and be familiar that these are D&D themes on your mind. That's good to know, actually.
Sure. I will pick a little bit on the running a business chart here because the outcome ranges from paying up to 1.5 times the business maintenance cost all the way up to the business covers its maintenance cost and earns a profit. What's the maintenance cost, though? Doesn't say.
Oh. Painful. We've all made mistakes like this, I feel, or oversights, or run into troubling things to solve. So I've run into the same kind of problem myself. Kind of too bad. So it's just a straight roll. It's just like bam, roll.
Let's see.
And here's
rolls percentile dice and adds the number of days spent on the activity. So the more downtime you sink into it, I guess the better your chances.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a starting point.
Yeah. I mean, most of the downtime activities in the Dungeon Master's Guide are kind of a little loose, and it's just trying to like give you ideas and push you in directions, and I would say they're not thorough systems. Let's talk about carousing though, because that's the big one I want to go back to. Because I have in here, I should have somewhere hopefully Jeff Riant's carousing. This is from his blog, which I forgot to actually include in the clip. His blog is J. Riant's. I'm probably saying his last name wrong. rients.blogspot.com.
Classic, seen it 10,000 times, and then
never
realize you don't know how to pronounce it. Until we say it in public.
Yep. So sorry, Jeff, if I'm mangling your last name. Just realizing now I've never heard it said out loud. Okay.
Such a D&D thing.
Yeah. So this basically the idea here, and this is interesting because it came up. I just saw it scroll by in our chat of what about spending money to get XP. Now this Jeff's rules here basically double dip. It's assuming you're in an OSR or old school or classic D&D setting where you're getting XP for the money you find, and then he allows you when you go back to town to spend that money to get another XP per gold piece. right? So you're double dipping. But there's a cost, and that cost is you then have to make some dice rolls, and potentially something bad happens to you. There is a mishap, and he gives you a chart. You can only see about the first 10 items in the chart here. There's actually 20 on his full blog there. But there's various stuff like gaining a reputation as the life of the party, so that doubles your lifestyle costs in this town from here on out. Or you get a new tattoo, or you're beaten and robbed, and you lose all of your personal effects. Yeah. So there's all kinds of stuff in here. Really good stuff.
I'm pretty sure there's a result there of like wake up naked in bed with another party member or something like that.
Yep, romantic entanglement. Yep. Oh, yeah. There's all kinds of stuff.
Maybe that was a flourish to romantic entanglement, and then when we were playing at your place a couple of years back, over the course of the weekend, like every party member wound up in bed with every other party member by the end of the weekend, I think, by accident.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of stuff like that. And then there's expanded versions of this table. This table got very popular, and people made giant versions with lots of entries. So probably when we were playing, I might have been playing on the expanded table. But the thing I like about it is that it injects things into the campaign. Is another source of unexpected wrinkles into the campaign. Players, in my experience, freaking love it. There's a huge gambling aspect to it, and they love to just dump their money into this and see what nonsense their character gets up to.
Yeah. People like it.
Yeah. The downside to it, I would say, is I've seen players struggle with it who are trying to play more upright characters. I remember BJ in particular playing a paladin who we thought was like very morally upstanding, and was like, well, I wouldn't do this. But then he was feeling as a player left out because he wanted to roll on the tables. Yeah.
You know what? I felt that same. Honestly, I felt that same thing myself. Actually, I get that. There's part of me where the world is terrible, and the medieval world that I'm simulating is gruesome, and life is horrible, and that even the upstanding people, the people attempting to be upstanding, get dragged down to the gutter, has actually kind of been entertaining for me to watch using the carousing tables. So there's pros and cons to that, but I get that. I've actually been torn about using it myself sometimes.
Yeah, I like it. So it is a money sink. I would say that's not its primary reason, although that's a side benefit for me of using it. I like that it drains some money out of the players, and I like that it introduces random effects. So there was a comment, I think, in the chat about and I've heard people doing this before, of just going full bore into that and just saying you don't get any XP for finding coins. You have to spend them to get the XP. Which is an interesting angle, right? Again, you're not at this point now. You're not screwing with the leveling progression, but you're basically saying, all right, players, find a way to spend your coin, right? Either go out drinking and gambling and whatever, or become a builder, investor, whatever. I definitely had a player in my BX campaign who was playing a paladin. This is not BJ's, different player, who then started not only just tithing money, but actually built an orphanage. It's like, I'm going to build an orphanage. It's like, yeah, great.
That's nice.
Great. Yeah,
nice.
So did stuff like that.
That's nice. So have you ever used you got to? I don't think you've ever taken the step of all XP comes from spending money. I don't think you've ever done that, have you?
I haven't, although I honestly find it tempting. I think if I was going to run another old school game, I would consider it. That's an interesting idea. The only thing I would worry about that is how does that fit with carousing, because I want the carousing rules in there.
Okay.
Maybe carousing is one of many ways that you could spend your money to get XP.
Gotcha.
Maybe.
At one point I thought really hard about the spending money for XP, and here was the takeaway after I did some reading, and this could be just me defending my biases or something like that. But if you look at the standard pulp literature, like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser or something like that, when they get money, when they get a treasure of gems, they're super happy. They're incredibly happy. They're incredibly upbeat, happy, like they're on top of the world. And then when the gems or jewelry get tricked out of it, or it gets stolen from them, they're way down, and they seem like they're emotionally at the bottom of their rope. And so I feel like the experience. That's the reverse of the experience coming in from money going out. I feel like what I'm seeing in the pulp literature is what classic D&D models is: money comes in and you're happy, money goes out and you're not so happy. So that's having reread Fafhrd and the Grey Mouse, or particularly the Stardock story. Actually, I think this is how this happens. I was like, that doesn't seem to model the pulp literature that I'm reading. So that's my current defense for my biases for old school D&D.
Interesting. Wait,
Yeah.
so are you arguing? Sorry, that's the argument for why you shouldn't get XP for spending money.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because obviously that's an incentive for doing it, right? So if you
Right.
get experience, then the players will be looking for. I want to get rid of this money.
Right.
And,
Right.
Well, and that's the opposite of what the characters in the literature are doing.
I guess. I feel like that's a point where I would lean more into the separation of player and character. I think the player wants to get rid of the money. I'm not sure that the character does. And I would, because I would look at both ways of, again, the two extremes of, one, my character is a lech and he's just going to, as soon as he gets money, he's going to go out and spend it on a wild party. He's happy to have money because he can now go spend it on having fun. The end result is he has no money and he gains experience. Sure.
I'm going to hit you with a murky mirror here.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with a murky mirror, and I don't mind having those things be aligned, sort of. I don't mind having the incentives for the player aligned with the incentives for the character.
Yeah, but you're not allowing for me to delight in the misfortunes of my character. As a player, I find it hilarious when my character wakes up naked at the local temple and is in serious trouble. I think that's hilarious. That definitely is not Murky Mirror, right? That's the opposite of Murky Mirror.
All right, it's a good, I haven't gone there in my own games, but you make a good point.
Okay.
Make a good point. That is an interesting thing.
Yeah, and it also does allow for the character who wants to build orphanages, right? Like, he does want to spend money, right? He wants to better the world around him.
I wouldn't mind, like, my first stab at something like that is now you have a bonus on reaction rolls in the area, or you have additional allies or something like that.
Oh, sure.
My gut instinct wouldn't be go to give experience for that. Whoops. Unplugged my headphones, sorry. I'm back.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, it's an interesting idea. I don't know if I need it. Again, I would also counter with I feel like part of that is a reaction to not wanting the double dip from carousing, and I don't mind the double dip from carousing. I've never seen it seriously imbalance things. The numbers
that actually didn't bother me either.
Yeah, I don't think the numbers are severe enough to actually make a huge
on
difference.
paper. On paper, I think I might have said that, but. Now, the other thing, I guess, is with the geometric XP, right? It has the potential to make more of a difference at a low level, and as you get to higher levels, it's probably going to make less and less difference.
Yep. Yeah, definitely depends on how you run it. I've in the past ratcheted up the amount of money and XP that can trade hands. Usually based on the level of civilization you're in. Like a big city, you can spend more and have a wilder party. Conveniently, that also usually follows the arc of my games. Players at first level usually are in some podunk village, and as they get higher in level, they're more likely to go check out the big cities. Maybe that's a coincidence, or I don't know. Maybe that's just the way I run my game.
I like what John Miller's writing right now in the chat. Actually,
okay.
He's supporting my. I believe he's supporting my argument, and therefore he gets extra points.
You have a particular line in here you want me to show?
But if PCs were forced to lose or waste money or XP, then they don't benefit from the treasure in other ways. So maybe that's a segue. So it kind of makes treasure a hollow reward if you're dumping it to just get the XP, and there's no concrete in-world benefit to the money.
I guess I didn't assume that it was either or. In my assumption, it was you got XP for spending money, but it wasn't like that money vanished. Like, you would spend the money on carousing or building an orphanage or buying a magic item or whatever. Point is, money goes out, you get XP.
Interesting.
Yeah. I feel like that's the direction I would go with it. Because I still want all those story elements, right? Like I want carousing that's going to generate this crazy stuff where you get in trouble with the local temple. Likewise, I want a player to be able to build an orphanage so that I can attack it with evil monsters, right? Like all of these add wonderful wrinkles to my game, and I want them. So I guess I want both. I want, yeah.
We agree that there ought to be some kind of in-game benefit to getting the cash, right? And so and this is what we've been wrestling with for years and decades of like what is the appropriate interesting things. So maybe we'll segue to where this all started with some original D&D stuff.
Sure.
In particular, there's one thing in particular actually that is we're going to see in original D&D that was deleted or at least forgotten about in all future editions. So that's actually the one that I kind of want to stick a pin in. So here's the first printing of original D&D Little Brown books. And so first of all, there's an equipment list. I mean, we all know that there. Probably stuff you can buy at first level. At the they're including armor and weapons and stuff like that. There's horses. And then way down at the bottom, there's a couple big ticket items like galleys and warships, which to me has an Arnesonian flavor. I'm going to take a stab and guess that's probably Dave Arneson's handiwork, why that's there. But enough of that. We know there's equipment lists. And then in the next thing in the player's book, actually, is magical research. And so you mentioned, Paul, one of the big things in 5th edition is trying to save up for magic items. And this is actually in the player's book, actually, where it's the last page, I believe. Magical research is having your magic users and clerics make new, unique spells on the last page. And that's a big ticket item, actually. So what the text there says is you need to pay 2,000 gold just to try to make a new first level spell. And doubling actually quadratically, it's quadratic each level, actually. So 4,000 at second level, 9,000 at third level, up to 64,000 at sixth level. And that amount of money is just an attempt to make it and gives you a 20% chance to successfully make the new spell. So you might be dumping 64,000 gold pieces and only have a 1 in 5 chance to successfully make your sixth level spell. So that's an element that's been intriguing. I had my players use that one time only, and it took the entire party's cache of money just to make an attempt at a new spell.
So I have a list here of things that I can imagine players spending money on between games.
Right.
And very quickly, I want to go back to the equipment list because you mentioned the galleys. So let me just put a pin in the research because I want to come back to that. But galleys, transportation in general has always been a money sink in my games, right? Generally, the way I run my campaigns, and this may be just a stylistic choice, I usually have big, sprawling wilderness with lots of towns and cities and whatnot, and many small dungeons sprinkled around. And that's generally how my campaigns go. I know other folks maybe like just put giant mega dungeon, right? And that's their campaign. And I think the problem with that is you don't get transportation costs. How do we get to the lost island where all these treasures are? I guess we got to buy a boat, right? I've had many players sink ridiculous money not only into buying a boat or a cart or however they want to transport, right? Oh, you're going to transport now. You have this cart and this wagon train with all your stuff, and now I'm going to attack it. Oh, now we have to hire retainers to defend it, right? And then inevitably my players also then want to customize it because they want it to look cool. Right. So now not only have they bought a fancy cart and hired retainers to defend it, but they're also getting that griffin they killed taxidermied so that they can put pieces of it on the cart, so it's the Griffa cart.
I swear to God, in my long career of DMing, at some point I'm going to start to expect that, and I never do. Whenever they go for the, I'm going to bling it out. I'm like, really? What the hell? What incentive do you accept? It's not in the rules. What am I?
They love it.
Someday
it's awesome.
I will start expecting that.
Yeah, because it's awesome. That's why. I started engaging in that. I have famously in my campaign, I always have this very high-level wizard who is usually a source of information to the party and who sends them on quests and whatnot. And I always give him a ridiculous penchant for taxidermy. He loves taxidermy. And the players are super intrigued by that, and then they'll use it both to their advantage and disadvantage, and it's hilarious. Viewers of our original birthday live stream will remember him as Peltar, who delighted in having a 3-egg cockatrice omelet.
Which still bothers me sometimes. It's still, so, I saw a picture of eggs the other day, and I was like, "Oh, geez, that Peltar guy. That seemed unwise."
It's pretty funny. So anyway, that's certainly a sink. Transportation in general, and then blinging up your transportation. But let me go back to the research.
Yep.
So here's my problem with this research: is one, it requires invention, right? You're only going to do this if you want to invent a whole new spell. How often does that happen? Probably happened a lot back in the day, and maybe not so much now.
Yeah, it's actually alternatively, if you're in a context where the DM is being tight-fisted about the spells, where you can't just pick stuff off the list, you have to go find it in the world. This also gives an opportunity to recreate magic missile spell. So you haven't found a magic missile spell for your book yet, you can try to recreate it this way. But most of the time, yeah.
Because that's certainly, I've fallen into that problem. I traditionally forget to leave scrolls around enough, and then my magic user players are suffering because their spell books are very empty. This is that's a much more severe, much more costly way to solve that problem. I'm going to show you. So from my long-running BX campaign, here is a page from my notebook where I started to collect all the things that you might spend money on in town.
Okay.
So the first thing right up there is hire a sage. And what do you want to hire a sage to do? Possibly you want him to identify your magic items. That was very frequent in my campaign. We found this magic item, we don't know what it does, please explain it to us. Since in BX D&D there is no spell that just does that, you got to pay a sage to do it. And so I made up some costs. Here you can see it's basically 10 gold pieces per item. Keep in mind I'm using the silver standard, so there's really like 100 gold pieces per item. And he's going to discover one property, the pluses, and one command word. So if there are multiple, going to have to pay him again. And again and again. So that was very frequent. My players would pay for that. And then research in general. Basically, like I said, my campaign's usually big open world with lots of little dungeons, which means there's a billion leads for the players to follow. I remember surprising a player once with this, where he's like, there's so many things going on, like, which one are we supposed to do? And I was like, there's no supposed, right? There's many things in the world, and you tell me what you're interested in, and that's what we'll pursue. Often to the point of, even in my games, I will introduce hooks and leads to an adventure I haven't invented yet. There's just a random idea of something that sounds kind of cool to me, and if the players latch onto it, I will write it, and if they don't, then ignore it. So you'll see this weird little table here that talks about the cost of research, 1 gold piece per day, or a discount of 18 plus D4 gold piece per month. And then a little 2x2 chart of how long does the research take. And it depends on if the thing we're researching is general or specific, and if it is known or requires invention. And known versus requires invention is literally a note to me, the DM. Do I actually know the answer of the thing they're trying to research, or am I going to have to invent it?
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Okay, great. I love it.
If I as DM have to make some shit up, it's going to take longer in game.
You know what? Actually, all of a sudden, boy, that just really thrilled the hell out of me. So there's actually if I as DM need to go do research for this time, it costs you more in game.
Yep.
I actually did that. Suddenly, that really thrills me. The more work you make me do as DM, the more gold it costs you. Jeez, I like that a lot.
Well, in this case, it's more in-game time, which is trying to buy myself the time to do the invention.
Yeah. But I'm going to take that. That's how I'm going to use it. I'm going to start charging my players more. The more design work I have to do.
I have to do. I'm charging you in-game gold.
Yeah, great.
It's good.
Great. I love it.
What else do we have here? In the middle, we have scroll costs. So I made up a cost schedule for scrolls. I decided that they could hire... This is kind of loosely inspired by Len Lakofka, the late great Len Lakofka. I started my campaign in Bone Hill. Bone Hill specifies in the town of Restonford there is this sorcerer Peltar, and he has these 3 apprentices. Well, what are those apprentices doing day by day? I figured there's probably scribing scrolls for him. So you can buy those scrolls. Here they are. Here's their cost schedule. And I decided kind of arbitrarily, although I like the split, especially with Book of Spells, that basically you can buy scrolls of 1st, 2nd, or 3rd level. That the higher level ones, no, you can't just buy those off the charts. And then the cost increases. And then at one point, my players asked if they could get Peltar himself to scribe a 3rd level scroll because they wanted the extra levels of casting. They wanted like a fireball as if cast by Peltar, not a fireball cast by the minimum. And I was like, all right, sure. And so I put that line in there of double the cost for that.
Great.
The last set of charts is around gems, and here's where this one comes from. This is, I decided that in order to resurrect someone and to cast the reincarnate spell, you need a 500 gold piece gem, which is consumed in the casting. Okay. And that was a major pinch point money-wise for my campaign, was if you want to resurrect somebody, it costs a lot of money. So they wouldn't waste it on like a 1st level jerk, they would just make a new character. But if an important PC got killed, they would try to go find a gem, or they even started hoarding them, honestly. They would start trying to hoard the gems just in case they needed them.
Now that's a rule that like shows up in D&D in 3rd edition, right? So the Raised Dead resurrection spells need exactly that. They need a 5,000 gold piece diamond. And in our economy, that turns into 500 here.
Right.
So that's common-ish nowadays.
Right. So my gem chart here is the very bottom chart, if you can read it, says, can I buy a 500 gold piece gem?
Yeah.
Right. That's what they would ask. They go back to town. Can I buy a 500 gold piece gem? And, all right. So I made this ridiculous mechanic where I had them roll a d20 plus their raw charisma plus 75 and compare it on this chart. And that 75 I would vary based on how big of a city they're in.
Great.
And so, since your charisma range is from 3 to 18, that kind of gives you, I think, bare minimum of like 79, and then et cetera, et cetera. And you can see the results here are anything from no an insult, yes, but at a terrible cost.
Read all the results. That's what I was laughing at a couple minutes ago. Read all the results, please.
The results are 1 to 5, no and insult, which is, I mean, you've got to be in a terrible place and with horrible modifiers to actually get a number that low. From 6 to 79, no. The answer is just no. 80 to 93 is yes, but at a terrible cost. So usually I would do things like, oh yeah, I have a gem. Don't ask me where it came from. Don't ask me who might be looking for it. And the players frequently found themselves in hot water because they had bought a very hot gem and somebody came looking for it. There's yes, but it takes these 6 days to get it, which is also terrible if you're trying to resurrect somebody because there's probably a time limit on that.
Great. Jeez, that's good.
Yes, but it's worth 10d10 plus 10d10 value. So I have a better than 500 gold piece gem to sell you, and I want all the money for it.
Great.
And it's still going to get consumed. And then 00 and higher is just yes. Here you go.
Great. That's lovely. That's lovely. It's brief. That's flavorful. There's a great ideas there. I like that a lot. My players spent a lot of time either looking last minute for one of those gems and sinking pool the money, guys. We got to save, Joe because he's really important and he died. And oh my God, we have 3 days left to resurrect him. So that made some hilarious moments. And then also later in the game, they started trying to hoard them. They would be like, all right, if we can find a gem that's worth this much money, it's super valuable. So everybody pool in. We're going to buy it just because it's here and we're going to hang on to it. Great. Thanks. So while you've been showing your rules there, a couple of questions have gone by in the chat. And I think some people are talking about what so you mentioned potions and scrolls there, with Peltar's apprentices. And so a couple of people asked, what exactly is in the books to original D&D? And there is actually, I think it's on about page 4. It's here are your character classes. There are fighters, and there are magic user wizards. And among the thing magic user wizards can do is they can make magic items. And you get, it's only about 6 things. There's a table of about 6 things for suggested magic items and how much it would cost to create them for your magic users. But the problem is in original D&D, that doesn't get unlocked until, if I recall correctly, 11th level. By the book original D&D, magic users can't make any items at all, even a first level potion or scroll until 11th level. So then you're in the situation, like even as the DM, as far as world building of how many, I mean, none of my players have ever hit 11th level. How many 11th level wizards even are there in the world to deal with?
Yeah.
Maybe none. And so over the years, you know, the question has been, how much do you loosen up on that? And so from edition to edition to edition, basically that's been made a little bit easier. And you can see how Paul is house ruling certain things in his game in a way that feels right.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff doesn't translate well to 5th edition, right? And I can't charge. One of my very common early low-level sinks was identifying magic items. Well, in 5th edition, any magic user can just cast that.
Right.
Likewise, you know, you talked about like potions, right? In 5th edition, your basic lowest, least powerful healing potion is in the basic equipment list. It's just right there. You can just buy them. Which also I've had frequently then brings up the question in my games of like, well, what about the bigger ones? Can I buy the fancier ones? And then I got to decide. What I've ended up doing, honestly, in my games is saying that like it depends on what town you're in and who's making them, and then I use it as a kind of a forcing function to make my players move around.
Right.
And he's like, oh, well, you bought all the potions in town. It's going to take us another couple of weeks to brew more.
Yep, I like that. And I'll say, is probably, you know, people who are familiar with my OED house rules, they know, A, I don't have any clerics. B, I do try to fill in the healing, silo. But I do allow regular potions of healings to be bought, you know, at a particular price, and I actually add it to the basic equipment list. So that is a common thing. It's worked for me pretty well, actually. There was a point where I was worried, like, going to have so money, it's become a non-issue. But that actually has been kind of a nice stepping stone. It's a little bit more pricey than mundane stuff. It's a place whereby players are usually buying 3 or 4 per adventure, and it is, and it's something they've always had to think about.
Yeah. Where do you land? I'm curious, Jan, where do you land in general on buying and selling of magic items?
Okay, you know what? We are not going to get. I am realizing. So how many? I am currently 3 lines into my notes. I have a page of notes. And we've currently gotten 3 lines in. So I think, Paul, we should have another episode just on buying and selling magic items, because that's a whole. I want to give that a proper treatment so much, and it varies by edition, and that's an interesting one because they've gotten. You know, it wasn't a rule, and then it was like completely open field, and then they retracted it. So that's actually a really interesting place where they've put that in the wall in some editions.
Great. So, future episode of Wandering DMs.
Future episode, absolutely.
Buying and selling magic items. Okay.
The thing, if you go back to the original D&D pages that I pulled out.
Yep.
After the magical research, which got us onto the potions and scrolls, stuff like that, there's construction, and we don't need to go into particular details about that. That's always been part of the game. Building that's generally considered to be the end game of original D&D, is you are going to develop the wilderness, you're going to take over territory, you're going to build a castle, and here are the single biggest ticket items in the game, presumably. Now, do you want to have your players just sit on a giant wad of cash from levels 1 to 9 and then spend it all on the castle at the end? That might not be the best texture, so maybe that's not the best solution in the world, but that's always been there.
I mean, we saw when we were looking at the 5th edition downtime activities, one of them is build a stronghold, and their prices in there of like 50,000 gold. So
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So moving on from that, now the other thing you mentioned, you're going to get you mentioned getting galleys and carts, and then you're going to hire people. So then there's a page of mercenaries that you can hire, and higher priced specialists. Like on this page, you can see a ship captain and a smith and a spy, and there's an alchemist option, things like that. Also mercenaries. So that's always been part of. And that's pretty obvious, as we come away from the wargaming tradition that fed into D&D. I mean, they were wargaming immediately before this game was invented. So of course you're going to be able to hire armies in the castle. Now, in addition to that,
I want to say, there's like spy to me jumps out as the most interesting one, because what that implies to your campaign is fascinating. If I got to hire a spy, it's such an interesting kind of backhanded way to say this kind of stuff can happen in your D&D game.
I agree. And one of the things, this is one of the things that I didn't really understand until I got my hands on the Little Brown books from 1974, is many of us are familiar from later editions, like the assassin character has a special attack, right? Has a special assassination attack. And, that's still in 5th edition. And at least in 1st edition, you get this table of level of assassin, level of target, and there's just a percentile die roll for did they die?
Yep.
And in 1st edition, like I look at that table and it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me, actually. There's like things here, but you completely short circuit the whole combat routine. Well, if you look back in original edition D&D, you can see where the source was, and it was actually the very first supplement, and it was for off-stage handling when you hire an assassin and send him off stage.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You hire an assassin and say, go get this person. You don't actually play through the adventure of the combat. There's just a flat percentage chance about whether the assassination worked or not. Now, how does a spying mission work? They use the same table.
Yep.
You hire a spy of a particular level, send them against some opponent, and you look up in what was originally the assassination table, use the exact same percentage, and that's what tells you whether your spying mission was accomplished or not.
It's great.
So that table finally made sense to me, and obviously nowadays it's something very, very different, but I was like, right, because you have to handle the off-stage stuff when you're hiring NPCs, as you do. Which I thought was interesting.
It is really, it's very fascinating. Very fascinating. I feel like...
And you can hire spies of different levels, so you can suck out, as much money as you can possibly spend, which gives you some nuance there. The other thing on this page that I highlighted, two paragraphs on the bottom of this page here, is one is, it also costs money just to find the people in order to hire them. So you can't just queue up and say, I want a spy or I want heavy cavalry. First of all, you have to go advertise and hire a crier or put up, advertising to go find the people to hire in the first place. And I think the rule there is 100 to 600 gold pieces just to put out the ad to get the person to come and apply for the job before you even hire them. So in my original D&D games, that's been a place that money is being sunk into, is the advertising before the hiring of henchmen and specialists and stuff like that. And then the very last thing, which is the thing that I really wanted to highlight, is there's a paragraph titled Rumors, Information, and Legends. And, in later adventures, we're familiar with starting with like a table of rumors about the dungeon or about the area or something like that you parse out. But the original rule is you had to pay for that. And so the rumors paragraph says here, you can go to a tavern and you can buy a round of drinks for 10 to 60 gold pieces and then get a rumor. And I rely on this. This doesn't show up in any later edition whatsoever, but I rely on this very, very heavily. I actually, in my games, I was actually not coming to the table and just saying, a man in a cloak comes and has a map and tells you there's a secret quest. I actually just sat at the table and said, you can go to the bar and you can pay money and maybe you'll find a rumor about a dungeon or something like that. And until that, so basically the players have to pay me to get an adventure.
That's fantastic. You're queuing right into that. Like, and do I have to write this adventure, or was it pre-made?
Pretty much. And as we all know, not all rumors are true. So sometimes they would queue up, they would pay money, and I'd give them a false rumor, and it was bunk. Yeah. And some players were like believing everything, and some players were disbelieving every single thing. So there were some players that did believe that every single rumor I ever handed out was always false.
Oh, jeez.
But so to me, I feel like the funny thing is in my game, it's the reverse of the carousing rules, right? So the carousing rules work by you go on an adventure and then you get money and then at the end you spend it, and maybe there's a complication. But for me, the spending actually happens first. Because you have to spend money in a rumor to begin with that's going to get you into some terrible situation, and then you choose about whether to go explore that or not. And so personally, I've really liked that as both a way to suck a reasonable amount of money out, to parse out both true and false rumors about dungeons or areas or places or people that are in the world. It's not always a dungeon. It has been Count Ellensworth lives in a castle on the coast and is renowned for taking vast amounts of treasure and throwing it into the ocean. And is that a thing? And some players believe it and some don't. And can we get that or not? Or is it just crazy? Or is he insane? So personally, I look at this as the reverse of the carousing rules, and I personally actually really liked it. And I'm really surprised it hasn't been in later editions. But you only find this in the original edition, and it never got into later editions. But I've liked it. I really like the pay for rumors, pay for adventures aspect, and I've kind of into that.
I like it too. You'll see, I used it a bunch in that birthday game, right, where we had decks of cards of rumors, both rumors at the tavern, and I think the rantings of the cultist who had been captured by the Baron. Right. So you could go.
He was being interrogated.
He was being interrogated. Yeah. You could go bribe some of the Baron's men to tell you some of the rantings or let you listen in on the rantings of their prisoner.
When you first said that, I was like, "What? What?"
I think that worked super well. I think that was born, honestly, of me assembling a rumor table and then looking at it and being like, "But how would anyone know this? How would it? Oh, it must be inside information. Oh, there must be an insider. All right, someone's been captured."
I will say, okay, so with my rumors, I will say I tend to play that a little bit more loosey-goosey, and I will say there have been a large number of things where the players have gone, how did anybody know that? How did anybody ever know that? And I kind of got into a habit of actually saying, well, my great uncle was an adventurer and went into the dungeon and came back with this crazy story that nobody believed.
Yep, I guess, yep.
Okay. There's one last thing actually that I pulled up, and it's funny because the comments keep pointing out things that I forgot about, frankly. But there's one last thing on my mind in original D&D. If you go to the next image, which was the last thing, pretty sure the last thing I had here, was there's an upkeep rule in that red box that I have up there, and we saw in 5th edition or 3rd edition you can choose a living level about whether you're living in a shabby hut or a delightful mansion. And in original D&D, you don't get a choice. There's just a flat upkeep of 1% of your experience.
Interesting.
Per month, basically. And so having geometric experience charts, the amount that your upkeep costs per month goes up likewise. And you don't have any choice about it. You just got to pay that per month. I actually, and I use this. You see that again, it's in 1st edition. You basically have the same rule in 1st edition AD&D. And I don't mind this. I actually don't mind the fact that it just abstracts away all the shop, living, inn, food, whatever costs. And I just start the game. Every session I start, they're back in town, and I say, I actually even take an average of all the PCs that are with us, as a matter of fact, and I just say, you all have to pay me 500 silver pieces a day. And it works pretty well to keep the ridiculous amount of money to a reasonable level. If someone's missed a couple sessions, all of a sudden they actually have a problem and they need to go adventuring. And it has worked pretty well to just keep a thumb on, there is a pressure that you need to keep adventuring just to keep sustenance on your plate. So it's worked pretty well for me. The other thing is that the other little tidbit there is once you build a stronghold or a castle, you don't need to pay the upkeep anymore.
Because it self-maintains.
Presumably so. Presumably you're not paying rent. Presumably the peasants are providing you with tithes or whatever we're going to call that. So if you do go, so again, it's a specific incentive to go settle the wilderness, build a castle, because that would, and at a high level, obviously now you're paying enormous amounts for upkeep. on a monthly basis. So that actually is incentive there to wipe out the upkeep. The interesting thing is in advanced D&D, they actually flipped it. When you went to first edition, you build a castle, and now there's actually an upkeep on maintaining the castle, and it actually reverses that.
Interesting.
But I actually really like that rule of fixed upkeep. Again, so I go so far as sometimes I'll have players, like I had players come to the big city, and we have a moment where they haggle about the fee to get into the city. Okay, so it's going to cost, you've got a cart, this, it's going to cost you 1 gold piece each to get in the city. And the players take a pencil and go to strike out the 1 gold piece, and I say, yeah, don't actually do that. We're not actually literally going to keep track of that. That's going to be wrapped up in your monthly upkeep cost.
Okay. Interesting. So... Whew, okay, wait, I got a lot to react to, and I'm trying to wind back here.
I have now gotten 6 lines into my page of notes.
I like upkeep costs. I do like them being more open-ended. If you watch some of 10 Dead Rats, you'll see one of the most common things that my players are spending money on is nicer inns and fancier clothes. And the nice part is that the fancy clothes, that's right out of Warhammer Fantasy roleplay book. There's just, how it's almost the same chart. It's almost the same chart as the upkeep chart, but it's just clothing. How nice do you want your clothes to look? And my players are frequently using that because they need to blend in some look. Oh, we have to go to this fancy party. We better look like we belong. And then suddenly they're spending a lot of money on nice clothes.
For me, I'll say I've mostly then what is the increasing upkeep on is obviously a question, and I have ramped up your food is nicer, your clothes are nicer. Now you're eating meat every meal, and you're getting fancy bird feasts, and you're getting fantastic wine and scotch imported from distant towns and stuff like that. And so that's and you're crazy lunatic ne'er-do-well adventurers, and you just can't control yourselves, so you just put money around on enormous amounts of alcohol, and you literally can't control yourself. You don't have a choice.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's interesting to just automate that, I guess. I like it open-ended just because I think that my players will go farther than I do. That they'll just dump more money into it and just be like, no, I really go wild.
I've seen DMs on Twitter with the opposite problem. I've told just 3 days ago I saw a DM on Twitter say, no matter what I do, my players will not do anything but the lowest level of living situations. They will absolutely live in a ditch if it will save them the 2 gold pieces. And I cannot get them to go any higher level than the lowest possible level of live in a ditch.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's when I would start putting plot pressure on them of here's this plot line of the local baron has this great, money making or whatever it is that motivates your characters, has this great proposition for you, but you can't get in the freaking castle because you're a bunch of wretched scum who stink.
Can I introduce you to Dave Arneson's random disease table? Have I had the opportunity to introduce you to the random disease table?
Yep. That's excellent. I think that we have hit all of the items on my list of ways that I generally sap my players of money. We're starting, I think, at the end there of what you were going over, of edging into the other conversation on economy, which maybe we can reference viewers back. Go watch the other episode where we talked about all the problems of running a castle and macroeconomics within your game, because it's a whole other ball of wax.
So we clearly have a pin in a future episode about what is the economy around magic items specifically. Mm-hmm. Can you buy them? Can you sell them? Can you design them? Can you research them? How much? When? Where? Why? So that's a whole topic in itself we can get into. Yep. Other things, first edition has a training rule that we didn't get into, right? So at least in advanced D&D, when you level up, you got to pay for that. You got to spend 2 or 3 or 4 weeks and pay for that. Not something that I use in my games these days. I don't think you do either, Paul.
No, but I just a very interesting side note. One of my favorite, very kind of light role play games, which is barely a role playing game, is of course Warhammer Quest. And interesting thing is how this kind of collapses a lot of things we just said, because there's no experience points in Warhammer Quest. You literally just have to buy your levels. It just costs money. So, which I think is really fascinating, right? Because it's sort of like, it's both combining the you get XP for money and you have to pay training costs just into one, like, no, you just buy levels. They just cost money.
All right, you know what? Yeah, once again, all right. That's, that never crossed my mind, but that's nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. Okay.
Right?
Okay. And the other thing that we didn't get to, and I know a couple people in chat have mentioned it because they're good ideas, is if you look at the first edition DM's guide, and I do quote page 90 here, there's a several page section on the economy, and there's a subsection with the headline duties, excises, fees, tariffs, taxes, and tolls.
Nice.
And you get about 6 or 7 paragraphs on the subject of duties, excises, fees, tariffs, taxes, tithes, and tolls. And Gary Gygax, bless him, gives you a definition of each of those 7 different categories, and then goes through and gives a suggested example that's 1% of all goods brought into a town, or 2% if they're luxury items on the value. The entry fee is 1 copper piece per head or wheel, or 5 copper pieces if you're non-citizens, and then annual taxes of 1 copper per peasant, or 1 silver if you're a freeman, or 1 gold piece if you're noble, and then 10% sales tax on all sales items. And now, okay, and I got to admit, look, as someone who is, loves reading, and I got the DM's guide as a very young person, and I read it religiously, and I'm a little bit on the spectrum, and it's in the book, and I was like, it's in the book, it's in black and white, that's the rule, I'm going to do that in my games. And, with the wisdom of age that I'm slowly accruing, I don't think it's a great idea to be charging 1 copper piece per head or wheel, or 5 if you're a non-citizen coming town. And that's actually why now, when I saw original D&D, and I went, wait, that's not in here. That's not a critical part. The training's not in here, and the 1% sales fee isn't in here. That's not a core part of D&D. You don't need that in D&D at all. And now that I have the fixed upkeep, I'm like, kablam! There's your answer. So I don't actually do that anymore. I just wrap it in the upkeep. Yeah.
There's some interesting elements in the D&D rules, like the I think the charts for assassination and spying and whatnot, where I feel like they somehow missed the interesting part, right? There's like, oh, players want intrigue in their games. Okay, let's give them accountancy tables. Like, yeah, okay. You're almost there, man. You're almost there.
And then there are players from the earliest days that say, yeah, what Gary and Dave wrote in the rules, that's not remotely how they played.
Yeah.
And you're crazy to try to use what they wrote down on paper, because what they were doing, they were not able to express on paper. That's just a totally different thing. And I don't know. So here we are back in Rashomon situation. Nobody really knows what the hell the original game was.
All right, well, we're about out of time. If you have any thoughts on other ways to sap your players of money during a D&D game, definitely leave that in the comments. We'd love to hear more thoughts on that. I think you can never have enough ideas, I think, on how to make your players poor. So leave us some comments below. And if you have thoughts on the teased future episode of what is the economy around magic items, leave us some thoughts as well on that, and we'll roll that into next episode.
I agree. We probably missed a bunch of stuff. We had a bunch of other things we wanted to get to, but we have to wrap it up now because accurate time records must be kept. We keep saying that over and over. Accurate time records must be kept, and we are now at the end of our hour. So.
Oh, dear.
Remember, if you're new to the show,
it's
not all magic. Hardcore analysis of D&D and stuff, and how you can use it today in your games. So hopefully there's maybe some options, if you're a 5th edition player, some options that you hadn't thought about because they only exist in earlier editions or maybe other games, and feel free to try them out in your 5th edition game and see if that's an improvement or not.
Yeah, for sure.
And remember that if you are new to the show, you can like and follow and subscribe to us here on YouTube or Twitch or Twitter or Facebook. And we do have the handle Wandering DMs on all of those sites. Also, wanderingdms.com and the Wandering DMs GitHub if you're a coder.
If you prefer to listen to the sound of our voice and not see our smiling faces, you can get podcast-only versions of our shows on our website at wanderingdms.com. You can also find them through various podcast carriers such as Google Podcast, iTunes, and Spotify. If you're listening to us on one of those locations, please take a moment to rate and review us there. That helps other folks on those platforms find us, and we really appreciate it.
Yes, it really does. And, of course, thanks to our patrons who support the Wandering DM show. What we do here is totally dependent on your support, and we appreciate it so much. If you have the capacity and you would like to join our generous patrons, please do visit patreon.com/wanderingdms, and you see the different tier levels and benefits that we roll out, including right after the talk show, we go to our private Discord channel and continue the conversation with our patrons who choose to join the Discord. And if you are a patron, please do join in and tell us about the things that you like today or the things that you think we ought to try that we haven't thought about in the past. Don't forget upcoming shows. Paul has 10 Dead Rats on Thursday. We will have spotty Saturday Book of War shows with Dan and Isabel, maybe one this Saturday, maybe not. If you subscribe to YouTube or Twitch, you'll see upcoming events before they happen Saturday night. And of course, we're back next Sunday. Next Sunday, we have planned a special guest. We have John Peterson, author, historian, D&D historian extraordinaire, author of Playing at the World, and he's also released a new book recently, which I embarrassed my mind escapes me. It's The Radical Shift, I think. I think it's The Radical Shift, if I recall correctly. And so I will be reading that very quickly next week, this week. And we'll have John Peterson on next Sunday, which is February 7th, I believe. And we'll talk all about his new book and whatever else. So please join us and get in some questions to John. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer those. So that's what we have coming up. Is that it? I think that's pretty good.
Awesome.
Well, that's already a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you want? What do you want? I'm killing myself over here, people. Come on.
I'll make a quick mention that viewers of this show may remember back in May, we hosted a panel for a convention on creating custom monsters with a bunch of DMs Guilds folks. That panel actually generated a product. Accidentally. Everyone on that panel, myself included, ended up contributing to a book that is coming soon to DM's Guild called The Cubonomicon, which features 32 variations of the classic dungeon crawler. That's right, 32 different versions of the gelatinous cube for you to torment your players with. I've used some of them myself in a little playtesting in some of my games, and the players were pretty horrified. So check that out on DM's Guild coming soon.
I've seen it, and it's a delightful product. I've loved gelatinous cubes all my life, and there's a lot of really clever twists on that, including at least half a dozen by Paul himself, actually. So I actually like that product a lot. So don't forget, we'll be back next Sunday with John Peterson to talk about his new book, The Elusive Shift. The Elusive, the new book. Big thanks to Mr. Miller, who is a critical component of our live research staff here at Wandering DM, so thank you for that. And so John Peterson with us next Sunday, and I'm certainly looking forward for that. And of course, we are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so we hope that you'll be back next week to join us for another thought-provoking discussion.
We'll see you then.